When did your mom expose your secret for clout? I should have known something was off when Gavin walked into my birthday dinner. My ex-boyfriend from 2 years ago who I'd caught cheating. We'd ended badly and hadn't spoken since. But there he was, shaking hands with my uncle and taking a seat across from me. What's he doing here? I whispered to Mom. Oh, sweetie, let bygones be bygones. It's your birthday. She patted my hand and stood up to make a toast. Everyone raised their glasses expecting the usual parent speech. Instead, Mom's face took on this strange expression I'd never seen before. Like she was savoring a secret about to be revealed. 21 years ago, I gave birth to this beautiful girl. Raised her with good values. Taught her about love and forgiveness. She paused dramatically. Mom, I started, but she kept going. Which is why I need to share something important about growth and honesty. Her eyes locked on mine with an intensity that made my stomach drop. The table was silent now. Gavin shifted in his seat, looking like he wanted to bolt, but was trapped by the crowd. 2 years ago, when Gavin and my daughter broke up, he came to me devastated. This poor boy was heartbroken, and as a mother, I couldn't just watch him suffer. Stop. My voice came out strangled. So I comforted him, the way only an experienced woman can comfort a young man. She smiled at the confused faces around the table. My grandmother's eyes went wide. Uncle Tony's face turned red. My teenage cousins looked between Mom and Gavin, trying to understand what was being said. The truth was too awful for them to grasp immediately. We've been together ever since. Secret rendezvous while she was at college. He'd tell her he was working late, but really he was with me. Mom reached into her purse. She pulled out a pregnancy test and set it on the table like a centerpiece, the little plus sign visible to everyone. My cousins gasped. Aunt Maria stood up so fast her chair fell backward. Grandma started praying in Spanish. 7 weeks along, Gavin and I are having a baby. She beamed like this was happy news. I couldn't breathe. The room spun as 2 years of lies clicked into place. Late night calls, Gavin didn't answer. Weekends, he was mysteriously busy. My own mother sleeping with my boyfriend the entire time we were together and after. You're sick! Aunt Maria screamed. He was 19! Your daughter's boyfriend. He was legal, and technically ex-boyfriend by then. Mom shot back. Gavin finally found his voice. I didn't mean for this to happen. She pursued me. Said she could teach me things and... Uncle Tony's fist connected with Gavin's face before he could finish. Blood spurted from his nose as chairs scraped and men stood up. My male cousins looked ready to destroy him while my female relatives held them back. You destroyed my granddaughter for what? Some 19-year-old? Grandma's voice shook with rage. I fell in love. Real love. The kind she couldn't give him because she's cold. Selfish. Mom pointed at me like I was the villain. I ran to the bathroom and collapsed on the floor. I could hear shouting and breaking dishes from the dining room. When I finally came out, the restaurant was in chaos. Tables overturned. Food splattered on walls. Gavin holding napkins to his bloody nose while my cousins stood guard so he couldn't leave. Mom was sitting calmly in the middle of it all, rubbing her belly. Why? I stood in front of her shaking. Because I deserve love too. Real passion. Not just being someone's mother. She looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. With my boyfriend? While we were together? Tears streamed down my face. You were barely together. Always studying. Never making time for him. Someone had to show that boy what real intimacy looked like. She actually looked proud. The police arrived before I could respond. Restaurant management had called about the disturbance. They took statements while my family screamed accusations. Gavin tried to leave, but Uncle Tony insisted on pressing assault charges to keep him there. I walked out into the night air feeling hollow. My 21st birthday would forever be the day I learned my mother had been sleeping with my ex for 2 years, was now carrying his baby, had planned this announcement to hurt me as much as possible. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me look. The message made my blood turn to ice. Your mom's not the only one with secrets. Check your apartment. Gavin's brother. Attached was a photo of my spare key. The one I'd hidden outside my campus apartment. The one only Gavin had known about. And apparently his brother, too. My hands shook as I called my roommate. She didn't answer. Called again. Nothing. The photo timestamp was from an hour ago. While we'd all been at dinner. Something was in my apartment. Something Gavin's brother had left. Something that would make this nightmare even worse. And I was 20 minutes away with no idea what I'd find when I got home. The text came again. Happy birthday. This is just the beginning. My legs wouldn't move for what felt like forever, but was probably just seconds. The restaurant door closed behind me, and suddenly, I could hear my own breathing, fast and shallow in the quiet parking lot. My car was 20 feet away, but it might as well have been 20 miles with how my body was shaking. I forced one foot forward, then another, pulling my keys from my purse with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. The keys hit the ground with a clatter that made me jump. I bent down to grab them and dropped them again when I tried to stand up. My fingers felt numb and useless. Finally got them on the third try to practically ran to my car, looking over my shoulder every few steps. The parking lot was mostly empty now except for a few cars from the restaurant staff. I fumbled with the door lock 3 times before getting it open and threw myself into the driver's seat. Started the engine and pulled out way too fast, tires squealing a little. 20 minutes to campus felt like nothing and forever at the same time. I kept checking my mirrors, expecting to see headlights following me, but the road behind stayed mostly empty. Called my roommate again while driving, phone on speaker. It rang 5 times, then went to voicemail. Called again immediately. Same thing. 3rd time, 4th time, nothing. My stomach was doing this sick twisting thing, and I couldn't tell if it was from what Mom had done or from whatever was waiting at my apartment. The highway was pretty empty for a Friday night, which somehow made it worse. Every car that passed felt like a threat. A black truck stayed behind me for 3 exits, and I almost pulled off just to see if it would follow, but then it turned toward downtown. My roommate still wasn't answering, and now I was 5 minutes from campus. The familiar turn onto University Drive should have been comforting, but it just made everything more real. Someone had been in my home, used my hidden key, done something that Gavin's brother thought would make this nightmare even worse than finding out about Mom and Gavin. The campus entrance came up fast, and I slowed down, trying to think clearly. Security booth was lit up like always with the guard checking IDs. I showed mine and the guard waved me through without really looking. Turned left toward the student apartments, and that's when I saw it. My roommate's beat-up Honda wasn't in her usual spot by the mailboxes. She always parked there because it was closest to our building. The spot was empty. I pulled into a space near the entrance and sat there for a second with the engine running. Could go in alone and see what was there. Could wait for my roommate to get back from wherever she was. Could call someone for help. My phone was still in my hand from trying to call her. I scrolled to campus security's number and hit call before I could chicken out. It rang twice. A deep voice answered and said campus security. I explained about getting a threatening text with a photo of my spare key. Told him someone had been in my apartment while I was gone. Mentioned the restaurant incident with my family but kept it brief. The officer asked for my building and room number. Said his name was Abner Howell and he'd meet me at my building in 5 minutes. Told me to stay in my car with the doors locked until he got there. I waited, watching every shadow and movement near the building. A couple walked by holding hands and laughing. Normal Friday night for them. 5 minutes felt like an hour, but then I saw the campus security car pull up. 2 officers got out. The bigger one walked over to my car and I rolled down the window a crack. He introduced himself as Officer Howell and asked if I was okay. I nodded and got out, legs still shaky. Showed them both my phone with the texts from Gavin's brother, the photo of my spare key. The second message saying this was just the beginning. Abner's face got serious immediately. Asked if I'd been inside yet, and I shook my head. He asked about the restaurant incident, and I gave him the short version. My mom had been sleeping with my ex for 2 years and announced she was pregnant with his baby at my birthday dinner. Big family fight. Uncle Tony punched Gavin. Police came. Then I got these texts. The other officer was taking notes while Abner asked questions. We walked toward my building together with them slightly ahead of me. Got to my door on the 2nd floor, and Abner held up his hand for me to wait. He leaned close to examine the lock and pointed something out to the other officer. Fresh scratches around the keyhole, he said. Metal was scraped up like someone had trouble getting the key in. Definitely recent because the scratches were bright silver against the older brass color. He asked if I had my key, and I handed it over. The lock turned smooth and easy when he tried it. No resistance at all. Someone had definitely used a different key, and not very carefully. Abner told me to wait in the hallway while they checked inside. Both officers went in with their hands near their belts where their radios were. I pressed myself against the wall opposite my door, holding my breath. Could hear them moving through the apartment, opening doors and checking rooms. Abner called out that it was clear, but his voice had this weird tone to it. He said things had definitely been moved around. They came back to the door and waved me in. My laptop was open on my desk when I always close it. Always. The screen was dark, but the power light was still on. There was a piece of paper on my bed that hadn't been there this morning. White printer paper with black text. I walked over slowly and read it. Same message as the text. Happy birthday. This is just the beginning. But seeing it printed out and left on my bed where I sleep made it so much worse. This person had been in my room, touched my things, left this for me to find. Abner asked where I kept the spare key, and I showed him the spot under the stair railing where I'd hidden a magnetic box. The box was still there, but empty. No key inside. He said it looked like it had been removed recently because there was no dust or dirt in the box like there would be if it had been empty for a while. The other officer was taking photos of everything. The laptop, the note, the empty key box, the scratched lock. Abner asked if anything seemed missing and I looked around but couldn't tell. Everything was just slightly wrong. Books moved on my shelf, chair at a different angle, closet door open wider than I left it. Like someone had gone through everything without trying to steal anything, just wanted me to know they'd been here. We sat at my kitchen table while they filled out the report on their tablets. Abner said I couldn't stay here tonight for safety reasons. The lock was compromised, and whoever did this still had my key. He said campus had emergency housing available for situations like this. A secure dorm with controlled access. I could get some things together and they'd escort me there. The other officer was on his radio calling for someone to come change my lock tomorrow. Abner gave me his card and wrote his direct number on the back. Told me to call if anything else happened or if I remembered any other details. Said they'd increase patrols around my building and put an alert out for Gavin's brother. Asked if I had somewhere safe to stay tonight besides the emergency housing. I didn't know how to explain that nowhere felt safe anymore. Abner handed me a campus housing form while the other officer kept taking photos of my apartment. I filled it out with shaky hands, checking boxes for emergency placement and signing my name 3 times. They walked me to the emergency dorm building 10 minutes away. One officer in front and one behind like I was some kind of VIP needing protection. The building looked older than my regular dorm with heavy metal doors that required a key card and a code to enter. Dorothea Howell was waiting in the lobby with a clipboard and a ring of keys that jangled when she moved. She had gray hair pulled back tight and wore a university polo shirt with her name tag perfectly straight. She explained this was standard protocol when students faced credible safety threats and handed me a packet of rules. No visitors after 9 p.m., no propping doors open, always sign in and out at the front desk. The room was on the 3rd floor at the end of a long hallway that smelled like old carpet and cleaning products. Small bed against one wall, desk by the window, closet barely big enough for a week of clothes. Dorothea showed me how the door locked automatically and gave me 2 key cards in case I lost one. She said breakfast was from 7 to 9 in the basement and left her office number on a sticky note. My phone started buzzing the second she left, and I saw 23 notifications from our family group chat. Mom had posted about her pregnancy with Gavin like it was happy news, complete with heart emojis and baby bottle icons. Aunt Maria had responded with angry face emojis, and Grandma just wrote shameful over and over. My cousins were fighting in the replies, some taking Mom's side saying love is love, others calling her disgusting. The messages kept coming faster than I could read them, so I held the power button until the screen went black. There was an old phone on the desk with a campus directory taped next to it. I dialed my roommate's number from memory, but it just rang and rang before going to her voicemail again. Left another message saying I was in emergency housing and really needed to know she was okay. Her car still wasn't back, and nobody had heard from her since yesterday afternoon. 2 new officers showed up an hour later wearing regular uniforms instead of campus security gear. They needed my statement about the restaurant fight since Uncle Tony was charged with assault. I told them everything from the beginning. How Mom announced her pregnancy with my ex-boyfriend at my birthday dinner. The younger officer kept shaking his head while typing on his tablet. They asked if Gavin had threatened me before or if there was a history of violence. I explained about finding him cheating 2 years ago, but said he'd never been physical with anyone. They took photos of the texts from his brother and said those would be part of a separate investigation. The whole interview took 45 minutes, and they gave me case numbers for both incidents. Around midnight, my phone rang from its spot on the nightstand where I'd left it turned off. Somehow it had powered back on by itself, which made no sense until I saw it was plugged into a charger I hadn't connected. The caller ID showed Abner's number, so I answered even though my hands were shaking. He said they were changing my apartment locks first thing tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. sharp. Told me not to go anywhere alone until they figured out more about Gavin's brother and what he wanted. Said campus security would do extra patrols around both my regular building and the emergency dorm. I thanked him and hung up, then unplugged the charger and turned my phone off again. The bed was too soft, and the sheets smelled like industrial detergent that made my nose itch. Every time someone walked past my door, I tensed up, waiting for the handle to turn. The heating system clanged every 20 minutes like someone banging on pipes. I stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything that had happened in the last 6 hours. My mother sleeping with my 19-year-old boyfriend while we were still together. Getting pregnant with his baby and announcing it at my birthday dinner for maximum damage. His brother breaking into my apartment and leaving threatening notes on my bed. None of it felt real, but the scratches on my apartment lock were real. The fear in my chest was definitely real. I made a decision lying there in that strange bed with its scratchy sheets. I wouldn't let Mom or Gavin pull me into their drama anymore. Whatever sick game they were playing, I was done being a player. My safety came first, and the family could handle their own feelings about the situation. The next morning, my phone rang at 7:30, and Abner's voice sounded worried. They'd gone to change my locks and found something else during a more thorough search. A small camera hidden behind the air vent in my bedroom pointed directly at my bed. The tech team was pulling it out carefully to preserve fingerprints, but he wanted me to know right away. My skin felt like bugs were crawling all over it, thinking about someone watching me sleep, change clothes, everything. How long had it been there recording me without my knowledge? My phone buzzed with a text from a girl who lived 3 doors down from my regular apartment. She'd heard about the break-in from building management's email and remembered seeing someone suspicious yesterday. Tall guy in a dark hoodie hanging around our stairwell around 4 p.m., right before the restaurant dinner. She hadn't thought much about it since lots of people visited our floor, but now it seemed important. I thanked her and forwarded the message to Abner, who said they'd interview her today. He called back 20 minutes later saying they'd pulled the hallway security footage from yesterday. Clear video of someone in a hood using a key to enter my apartment at 6 p.m. exactly. The timestamp matched perfectly with when we were all at the restaurant dealing with Mom's announcement. Whoever it was knew exactly when I'd be gone and for how long. The campus police were sending everything to the city police since this was now a criminal investigation. Detective Roland Bailey called an hour later asking if I could come to the station to discuss getting an emergency protective order. He said having the camera evidence made my case much stronger than just the texts and break-in. I agreed to meet him at 2 p.m. and wrote down the address he gave me. My hands were still shaking when I called the campus counseling center and got lucky with a cancellation for 3 o'clock that afternoon. The receptionist marked it as urgent after I gave her a quick rundown of the situation. My phone started buzzing non-stop with Mom's calls while I was filling out the intake forms online. I ignored the first 5 calls, but she kept going, so I finally picked up on the 10th one. She started right away saying we needed to have a mature conversation about everything. I told her I wasn't ready to talk, and she immediately switched to blaming me for the chaos at the restaurant. I hung up and blocked her number for now. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from my academic advisor, explaining why I might need extensions on my assignments. She took notes while I talked and pulled up my file on her computer. She approved extensions for all my midterms and papers without any questions, and said she'd email my professors about the situation. Walking back to the emergency dorm, I noticed I had a voicemail from Gavin that I must have missed during Mom's call barrage. His voice sounded weird and strained as he admitted Mom had planned the whole dinner announcement. He claimed he'd wanted to tell me privately months ago, but she insisted on doing it publicly for maximum impact. I deleted the message halfway through when he started making excuses. My roommate finally called back right as I was unlocking my temporary room door. She was calling from her friend's dorm room across campus where she'd been hiding since yesterday. She told me she'd seen a tall guy in dark clothes hanging around our door yesterday afternoon and got a bad feeling. Something about the way he kept checking his phone and looking around made her decide to leave and crash somewhere else. She probably saved herself from walking in on him going through our stuff or worse. The campus police called to say they were taking the camera to their evidence lab and would document everything carefully. Detective Eleanor Bailey, who was Roland's partner on the case, said they'd dust it for prints and try to trace where it was bought. She sounded confident they'd get something useful from it. I spent the next hour at the police station filling out paperwork for an emergency protective order against both Gavin and his brother. The clerk helped me with the forms and explained that the judge would review it tomorrow morning. She said they'd both be served with notice today once the judge signed off on the temporary order. Around 5 o'clock, Aunt Maria's car pulled up outside the emergency dorm with Grandma in the passenger seat. They'd driven 2 hours after hearing what happened and brought containers of food and tight hugs. While we ate the homemade soup they'd brought, they told me this wasn't the first time Mom had done something cruel. There was the time she dated my high school friend's dad just to prove she could. The Christmas she'd announced her affair with Dad's brother at the family dinner, but nothing had ever been this extreme or planned out to hurt someone so badly. Grandma kept shaking her head and muttering prayers in Spanish about her own daughter being so twisted. After they left, I called my work-study supervisor at the library to adjust my schedule. I explained I needed to work only daytime shifts for safety reasons, and she immediately agreed. She even offered to have campus security walk me to my car after every shift until this was resolved. I was typing up an email to my professors when my phone buzzed with another unknown number. My stomach dropped as I read the new text from Gavin's brother saying he had images from the camera. He claimed he'd downloaded everything before the police got it and would post them online if I kept involving the cops. My whole body went cold thinking about what that camera might have recorded. I took screenshots of the thread immediately and forwarded them to Detective Bailey's email. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I thought about private moments in my bedroom being recorded without my knowledge. The idea that he might have watched me changing or sleeping made my skin crawl, so bad I wanted to scrub myself raw. Detective Bailey called back within minutes saying this new threat was actually good for our case. It proved he had access to the camera and admitted to the crime in writing. She told me not to respond to him at all and to keep documenting everything. The protective order hearing couldn't come fast enough. Detective Roland Bailey had called back within minutes of me sending the screenshots and told me to reply with just the word "received" to document I got the threat without engaging. I typed it with shaking fingers and hit send while he explained this would help build the harassment case by showing I wasn't escalating things. My roommate finally showed up at the emergency dorm around midnight, looking freaked out and carrying her laptop. She pulled up our shared cloud storage account and started scrolling through the access logs we'd never bothered checking before. Her face went pale when she found an unknown device had connected to our Wi-Fi around 6 that evening, right when we were all at the restaurant. The IP address didn't match any of our phones or computers, which meant someone else had definitely been in our apartment using our internet. She showed me timestamps of files being accessed, and I felt sick seeing my personal folders had been opened. The next morning, I called Gavin from the campus security office phone, while Officer Howell helped me record it. Gavin answered on the third ring, sounding tired, and when I asked about his brother knowing where my spare key was hidden, his voice got really quiet. He admitted he'd shown his brother the hiding spot months ago when they'd stopped by to grab something I'd left in his car. His brother had made some joke about it being a stupid place to hide a key, and Gavin said his brother had problems, but wouldn't say what kind. He kept saying he never thought his brother would actually use the information and begged me not to involve the police anymore. I hung up when he started crying. My phone buzzed with a long text from Mom offering to mediate between me and Gavin's brother if I'd meet her alone at a coffee shop. She wrote that she understood his anger since I was trying to ruin their happiness, and maybe she could help us all move forward peacefully. I took a screenshot and forwarded it straight to Detective Eleanor Bailey without responding because I recognized the manipulation immediately. She replied saying this showed a pattern of Mom trying to isolate me and control the situation. Detective Rowland called that afternoon with huge news that made my legs feel weak. They'd pulled purchase records from local electronics stores and found Gavin's brother had bought the exact same camera model they'd found in my room. The purchase was made with his credit card at a store 20 minutes from campus just last month. He said this was the smoking gun they needed, and Eleanor was already typing up the warrant request for Gavin's brother's electronics and home. She called an hour later saying the evidence was strong enough that she expected the judge to sign off on it by the end of the day. The protective order hearing happened the next morning in a small courtroom that smelled like old coffee and cleaning products. I sat at a table with the victim advocate while Gavin and his brother sat on the other side with a tired-looking public defender. The judge reviewed all the evidence, including the camera, the threats, and the purchase records, while Gavin's brother stared at the floor and Gavin kept wiping his eyes. When the judge asked if they had anything to say, Gavin's brother just shook his head, but Gavin started rambling about how this was all a misunderstanding. The judge cut him off and granted a temporary protective order requiring both of them to stay 500 feet away from me and prohibiting any contact, including through third parties. They had to surrender any firearms within 24 hours, and the order would be reviewed again in 2 weeks. Campus security got copies immediately, and I watched them add both photos to their watch list. 2 days later, I met with Counselor Muriel Bowers in a small office filled with plants and soft lighting. She had me describe everything that had happened, and then helped me identify what she called trauma symptoms, like the constant checking over my shoulder and not being able to sleep. We spent the session creating a safety plan with specific steps for managing anxiety, including breathing exercises and grounding techniques. She taught me the 5-4-3-2-1 method, where you name 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste. We scheduled twice-weekly sessions, and she gave me her emergency number for after-hours crisis calls. My roommate decided that night she wanted to move to emergency housing too after thinking about that unknown device on our Wi-Fi. We got a room next to each other and set up a check-in system where we'd text our locations throughout the day and call if plans changed. She downloaded a safety app that would alert me if she didn't check in on time, and I did the same. We practiced using the panic buttons and made sure we both had campus security on speed dial. That evening, my younger cousin sent me screenshots from the family group chat I'd left after the birthday dinner. Mom was writing long posts calling me dramatic and ungrateful, saying I was blowing everything out of proportion for attention. She claimed I'd always been jealous of her looks and couldn't handle that Gavin preferred a real woman over a little girl. My aunts were defending me, but Mom kept posting, even sharing old photos of me looking awkward in high school with nasty captions. Reading her words hurt worse than I expected, but it also confirmed I'd made the right choice cutting contact completely. My cousin said most of the family was disgusted, and several relatives had blocked Mom already. The next morning, I woke up to find a link from an unknown number showing a blurry photo of me sleeping in my own bed posted on some anonymous forum with the caption, "Sweet Dreams, Princess." My stomach turned as I scrolled through the comments from strangers making gross suggestions about what they'd do to me. I screenshotted everything and filed takedown notices on the site while my hands shook with rage and fear. Detective Eleanor Bailey picked up on the first ring when I called and told me to forward everything immediately for the evidence file. She said this was exactly the kind of escalation they'd been worried about, and it would help build the harassment case. I spent the next hour going through every social media platform and privacy site I could think of, looking for more photos while feeling sick about what else might be out there. Campus security called to tell me they'd been reviewing the building's key fob system records after getting the warrant for those records. The system showed my door was accessed with a physical key at the exact same time as the camera footage from the hallway, which proved Gavin's brother didn't hack anything but actually used the spare key. This meant Gavin had to have told him where it was hidden since nobody else knew about that spot under the fake rock by the stairs. Detective Roland Bailey called an hour later saying Gavin had just provided a written statement at the station admitting he'd told his brother about the key location months ago during a drunk conversation. Gavin claimed in his statement that he never thought his brother would actually use the information and that they'd been talking about how paranoid I was about security. The detective said Gavin looked scared during the interview and kept asking if his brother was going to jail over this. I told him I didn't care what Gavin was scared about anymore since he'd put me in danger by running his mouth. My phone buzzed with a text from Grandma saying she'd called a family meeting and confronted Mom about the pregnancy in front of everyone. After 3 hours of the whole family pressuring her and pointing out how messed up this whole situation was, Mom finally agreed to take a paternity test to confirm Gavin was actually the father. Grandma said she wanted proof of everything since Mom had been lying for 2 years, and nobody trusted her word anymore. Mom apparently threw a fit about how insulting it was to question her, but Grandma told her she'd lost the right to be trusted when she slept with her daughter's boyfriend. The family meeting ended with most relatives agreeing to cut Mom off until she got serious help and stopped playing victim. That same evening, Detective Roland Bailey called again with big news about the search warrant they'd executed at Gavin's brother's apartment at 6 that morning. The police had seized 3 laptops, 2 external hard drives, multiple USB drives, and a desktop computer from his bedroom. They also found receipts for the camera equipment and printouts of my class schedule that he'd somehow gotten access to. The detective said Gavin's brother had been home during the search and just sat there smirking while they bagged everything as evidence. He'd refused to answer any questions without a lawyer, but they had enough physical evidence that his cooperation wasn't needed right now. 2 days later, Eleanor Bailey forwarded me the preliminary forensic analysis report, which made my skin crawl. The tech team had found folders on his main laptop labeled with specific dates that matched nights I'd been away from my apartment for study groups or work. Each folder contained multiple image files, and the investigators were still going through everything to catalog what he'd captured. Some folders went back 6 months, which meant he'd been watching me way longer than just the recent camera installation. The detective said they were building a stalking case on top of the burglary charges, and this evidence was making it much stronger. I met with the Title IX coordinator at her campus office to discuss the privacy violations and ongoing harassment, since this was affecting my ability to attend classes safely. She reviewed all the police reports and evidence I'd brought and immediately opened a formal investigation into the situation. Within an hour, she'd issued an emergency ban preventing Gavin's brother from entering any campus property with his photo distributed to all security checkpoints. She also approved accommodations for me, including excused absences when I felt unsafe and the option to complete coursework remotely if needed. The coordinator said she'd been doing this job for 15 years and had rarely seen such clear evidence of targeted harassment. 3 days after the family meeting, Mom sent a handwritten letter to my emergency housing address trying to justify everything she'd done. She wrote 4 pages about how her affair with Gavin was true love and blamed her loneliness after Dad left 5 years ago. She claimed I'd always been cold toward her and that Gavin understood her in ways nobody else did. The letter made me so angry I couldn't even finish reading it and brought it straight to Muriel Bowers during our counseling session. Muriel read it while I sat there trying not to cry and then helped me process why Mom would send something so hurtful. She explained that Mom was showing classic signs of narcissistic behavior by making herself the victim in a situation where she'd caused all the harm. We spent the rest of the session talking about how to maintain boundaries with someone who refused to take responsibility for their actions. The next Monday, Mom and Gavin went to the medical center for the paternity test sample collection that Grandma had scheduled and paid for. Grandma went with them to make sure they actually showed up and didn't try to fake anything since she didn't trust either of them anymore. The nurse took blood samples from both of them and said results would take about a week to process through the lab. Everyone already knew what the results would show, but Grandma said she needed official proof to share with the family lawyer she'd hired. Mom kept complaining the whole time about how humiliating this was, while Gavin just stared at the floor looking miserable. During my next therapy session, Muriel Bowers taught me specific grounding techniques to help manage the anxiety and panic attacks I'd been having since everything started. She showed me how to identify 5 things I could see, 4 things I could touch, 3 things I could hear, 2 things I could smell, and 1 thing I could taste. We practiced the technique together several times until I could do it quickly when I felt my anxiety building up. She also taught me shame resilience exercises to combat the horrible feeling I got whenever I thought about those photos existing somewhere online. Muriel had me write down facts versus feelings about the situation to help separate what actually happened from the story my brain was creating about it. She reminded me that none of this was my fault, and that both Mom and Gavin's brother had chosen to violate my trust and privacy. I started practicing the grounding techniques every morning when I woke up and every night before bed to help calm my nervous system. The exercises actually helped more than I expected, and I found myself using them between classes when I felt overwhelmed. Muriel also gave me a worksheet for challenging negative thoughts that kept creeping in about whether I'd done something to deserve this. After a week of daily practice, I noticed I was sleeping a bit better, and my hands weren't shaking as much during the day. The next morning, Detective Eleanor Bailey called to tell me District Attorney Ezekiel Chandler had reviewed all the evidence and was filing formal charges against Gavin's brother for burglary and unlawful surveillance. She said the arraignment was scheduled for next week, and I'd need to be available if the prosecutor wanted my testimony. I wrote down the court date and time while she explained that Gavin's brother would have to enter a plea and the judge would decide about bail. The whole conversation made everything feel more real and official than it had before. I spent the rest of that day trying to focus on schoolwork, but kept checking my phone for updates about the case. My roommate came back from class and we made dinner together in the emergency housing kitchen, both of us still jumpy whenever someone walked past our door. She told me she'd started carrying pepper spray and had signed up for a self-defense class on campus. I decided to join her for the classes since sitting around worrying wasn't helping anyone. That weekend, Grandma called to say the paternity test appointment was coming up on Monday, and she was personally taking Mom and Gavin to make sure they actually went. She sounded tired and angry about the whole situation, but said the family needed proof, even though everyone already knew the truth. The arraignment happened the following Tuesday at the courthouse downtown. I sat in the back row with Detective Roland Bailey, while Gavin's brother stood at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit. His lawyer argued that the camera belonged to my ex-boyfriend, and his client was just retrieving property, which made me want to scream at the obvious lie. The prosecutor presented the evidence about the break-in and surveillance, showing the judge the threatening texts and the purchase records for the camera. Gavin's brother pleaded not guilty, which the prosecutor had warned me would probably happen since most defendants don't admit guilt at arraignment. The judge kept the no-contact order in place and set bail at $50,000, which seemed like a lot, but the prosecutor said it was appropriate given the stalking charges. After court, I got a text from Uncle Tony asking if we could meet for coffee. He looked exhausted when I saw him at the campus coffee shop, and he immediately started apologizing for punching Gavin at my birthday dinner. He said his lawyer had worked out a deal where he could do a diversion program instead of getting convicted for assault. The program meant anger management classes for 6 months and staying out of trouble, which he said was worth it to keep his record clean. I told him I understood why he'd snapped and didn't blame him for protecting me. He hugged me and said the whole family was on my side except for Mom, who most people weren't speaking to anymore. Later that week, the paternity results came back confirming what everyone already knew. Gavin was definitely the father of Mom's baby. No surprise there. Mom sent out this ridiculous family email about moving forward with grace and understanding that most of my relatives immediately deleted or ignored. Aunt Maria forwarded it to me with just a eye roll emoji as her only comment. Grandma was so mad about the email that she called Mom and told her she needed professional help. The family elders had a meeting without Mom and decided she and Gavin had to go to couples counseling and individual therapy if they wanted any relationship with the extended family. Grandma delivered this message personally and said Mom actually cried, though whether from shame or just being mad about the ultimatum was anybody's guess. Mom tried calling me after that, but I didn't answer and just forwarded her voicemails to Muriel Bowers to discuss in therapy. 2 weeks after the arraignment, there was a hearing about making the restraining orders permanent. The judge reviewed all the evidence again and granted a permanent order against Gavin's brother that would last 3 years. She also extended the protective order against Gavin himself for the same time period, meaning neither of them could come within 500 feet of me or contact me in any way. The university got copies of both orders and officially banned Gavin's brother from all campus property forever. They also warned Gavin that he couldn't enter any student housing areas or academic buildings, and campus security posted their photos at all the entry checkpoints. I felt safer knowing security guards were watching for them, though I still looked over my shoulder constantly when walking around campus. My roommate slowly started going back to her regular class schedule after missing almost 2 weeks. We both carried personal alarms now and never walked alone after dark, always texting each other when we got somewhere safely. The self-defense classes were actually helping us both feel more confident, and the instructor taught us specific moves for getting away from someone grabbing us. I started looking for a new apartment off campus with better security. After visiting a bunch of places, I found one with electronic locks, controlled access to the building, and security cameras in all the common areas. The rent was more than my old place, but my dad helped with the deposit after I explained everything that had happened. Moving day was exhausting, but also felt like a fresh start. My new apartment had a doorbell camera I could check from my phone and windows that locked properly. Aunt Maria and some cousins helped me move boxes while Uncle Tony installed extra locks on the windows just to be safe. I gave the building manager photos of Gavin and his brother so they'd know to call police if either showed up. Detective Eleanor Bailey called the next week with an update about the leaked images online. She said most of them had been successfully removed through takedown requests to the websites, though she warned me honestly that some might resurface later since nothing on the internet really disappears forever. I appreciated her being straight with me about it, and decided to accept this imperfect outcome rather than obsessing over something I couldn't control. She also mentioned that Gavin's brother's lawyer was trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't interested in anything less than jail time. The detective said the evidence was strong, and they expected a conviction even if it went to trial. I thanked her for all her help, and hung up feeling like maybe things were finally starting to get under control. My professors turned out to be way more understanding than I expected when I went to their offices with documentation from campus security and the police reports. My history professor looked at the restraining order paperwork and immediately offered to let me retake the midterm I'd bombed the week after everything happened. She pulled up my grades on her computer and showed me how I'd been getting A's on everything before that birthday disaster, then watched my scores tank for 2 weeks straight. My chemistry professor did the same thing, letting me make up the lab I'd missed and giving me extra time on the next exam. Within 3 weeks, my GPA climbed back to where it had been before, actually even better in some classes since I threw myself into studying as a way to not think about everything else. Aunt Maria called a family meeting at her house on a Saturday afternoon and basically laid down the law about Mom. She had everyone sit in her living room while she stood by the fireplace with a notebook, reading off boundaries that most of the family had agreed to. No more holiday dinners with Mom unless she went to therapy for at least 6 months first. No baby shower planning until she apologized to me properly. Uncle Tony sat there nodding along while Grandma kept crossing herself and muttering prayers. My cousins all agreed to the new rules and we restructured Christmas plans so I wouldn't have to see Mom at all. The meeting lasted 2 hours and ended with everyone signing an actual document Aunt Maria had typed up, which felt weird, but also kind of good to have everything official. 3 weeks later, Mom texted asking to meet and I only agreed if Aunt Maria came with me. We met at a coffee shop downtown at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday when it wouldn't be crowded. Mom showed up 20 minutes late wearing this expensive maternity dress, even though she was barely showing yet. I sat across from her with Aunt Maria next to me and told her I needed at least a year before I could even think about having any kind of relationship with her. Mom started crying and saying I was being dramatic, but Aunt Maria shut that down fast. I explained that what she did wasn't just about Gavin. It was about deliberately hurting me on my birthday in front of our whole family. She tried to argue, but I got up and left after 10 minutes because there was nothing else to say. A package arrived at my new apartment from Gavin's lawyer 2 days later with a formal apology letter and a no-contact agreement. The letter was typed and probably written by the lawyer, but Gavin had signed it along with a promise to never contact me again. The agreement said he would focus on preparing for the baby and staying out of legal trouble, which his lawyer probably made him add. I signed my copy and sent it back, feeling like at least that chapter was officially closed. 3 months after that horrible birthday, almost at the end of the semester, I had a small dinner at my new apartment with just my roommate and 2 other friends from my study group. We ordered Chinese food and watched movies, and nobody mentioned what had happened or asked how I was doing, which was exactly what I needed. My roommate gave me a cupcake with a single candle, and we laughed about how this was my real birthday celebration. It felt like I was finally getting my life back, piece by piece. My roommate and I installed this metal lockbox outside our door that needed a 4-digit code to open. We kept our spare key in there instead of under a rock or doormat like before. She joked that we were being paranoid, but we both knew we'd rather be safe than sorry after everything that happened. We also got one of those doorbell cameras that sent alerts to our phones whenever someone approached, which made us both sleep better at night. The box cost $40, and the camera was another $100, but it was worth it for the peace of mind. My last therapy appointment before finals was on a Thursday morning with Muriel Bowers. We sat in her office going through this worksheet she'd made about my progress over the past 3 months. She pointed out how I was sleeping through the night again without nightmares, how my panic attacks had gone from daily to maybe once a week, and how I'd stopped checking over my shoulder constantly when walking around campus. My anxiety medication dose had been cut in half, and I was actually looking forward to next semester instead of dreading it. She said I'd made remarkable progress considering everything I'd been through and scheduled me for monthly check-ins next semester instead of weekly. Nothing about the whole situation had been simple or clean, but sitting in my new apartment that night studying for finals, I realized I'd built something better than what I had before. Real safety measures instead of just hoping nothing bad would happen. Clear boundaries with toxic people instead of pretending everything was fine. Friends who actually supported me instead of drama and lies. Next semester felt like a real fresh start, and for the first time in months, I was actually excited about it. That's the full story and the takeaway. Hopefully it gave you something useful to think about. Subscribe if you'd like to catch the next one.